Today I want to show you how to mix skin colours in watercolour using just 3 colours. I'm using a range of paints today. For the first set of swatches you'll see I'll be using a Maimeriblu yellow, an Art Spectrum pink, and a Winsor & Newton Cotmans blue. My second set will all be Roman Szmal watercolours. I'm using my etchr sketchbook. This is the A4 landscape sketchbook. It has 230 GSM 100% cotton cold press paper. This is my Roman Szmal watercolour set. It's my absolute favourite. I love these paints. This little one is a mixed set. It's my travel palette, and the paints in here are a variety of different brands from Art Spectrum, Maimeriblu, Winsor & Newton, Daniel Smith and Core. I know that people will often have mixing sets in a mixture of warm and cool primaries, so that's what I'm using today. My first 3 colours are a cooler set. I'm using the lemon yellow from Maimeriblu. It's PY175. I'm using Art Spectrum Permanent Rose, which is PB19. And I'm using the Cotmans turquoise, which is actually a mixed pigment. It's phthalo blue, PB15, and a little bit of PG7. So essentially I'm using a combination of the yellow, the pink and the blue. I start off by mixing the yellow, and I start by adding a little bit of the red, in this case the permanent rose. And then once I get an orange that is quite similar to a light flesh tone, I add a tiny bit of blue just to desaturate the mix. And then essentially it's a matter of playing around with the quantities to get the kind of flesh tone that you're after. It is important with watercolour painting to actually water these down. If you use them at full mass tone, they're going to be too intense for skin, but when you apply water to them, they actually make really beautiful translucent skin washes. But what you'll see as I go on is that I can mix a full range of flesh tones from very, very pale through to very, very dark. When I'm painting portraits, I work in many layers, starting with the palest possible wash. This doesn't matter whether I'm painting someone with fairer skin or darker skin, I always work the same. I also have a tendency to make very pink skin tones. It's a stylistic thing. And you'll get a chance to see that towards the end of this video when I will paint a portrait. It's kind of a balancing act getting the colour right. If you mix red and blue, obviously you're going to get something resembling a purple, depending on the red and blue you choose. And skin isn't purple, although I do tend to use purples for shadows. And so the key to desaturate that and bring it back to a neutral is to add a complementary, and in this case it would be yellow. The same is true if you mix red and yellow to make orange. You desaturate it with its complementary, which is blue. And so essentially you're always working with the complementary of each colour that you're mixing. That also means you could potentially make skin colours just using 2 complementary colours. Here I'm using a warmer primary set. These are my Roman Szmal colours, and this first one is Hanza Yellow Medium, which is PY74. I'm using napthol red, which is a really bright true red, which is PR122. And And I'm using phthalo blue again, but this time I'm using the red shade, which is a bit warmer than the green shade, which we saw in the turquoise. It's PB15:6. But ultimately you can use any variation. You can use any yellow. You could use yellow ochre. Bear in mind it may granulate. Naples yellow is a really nice mix, although it can be a little bit opaque. Cadmium yellow as well, also a bit opaque. You can use any red. I actually particularly love using the cherry quinacridone red, which is a really pinkish red, or you could use a pinkish magenta. And you can use any blue as well. You could try using Prussian blue. Phthalo blue is probably my favourite because it's a really nice blue, but it's not granulating. I would probably avoid ultramarine blue. I have used Indanthrone blue as well. You'll notice with this set that the colours don't differ a great deal. You can still achieve, very similar skin tones. Same thing as before, starting from those lighter sort of flesh shades and moving through to darker ones. The only difference being these ones are slightly warmer compared to the slightly cooler ones from before. But it really doesn't matter at the end of the day whether you're using a warm set or a cool set. And it doesn't even matter if you mix them up and use, say, a cool yellow and a warm red, or a warm yellow and a cool red, because ultimately you're always working with the three colours. In order to get these darker colours, you really need to pick up a lot more pigment. So with the really pale flesh tones, you only need a small amount of pigment and the tiniest amount of blue to desaturate the orange base, because you're really relying on the water to tone that colour down and to create those light skin tones. With the darker skin tones, you need to use a lot more paint, a lot more pigment to really mix those dark mixes. Of course, you can water them down as well, which you see that I'm doing here, and work in finer layers as well. But I just wanted to show you that it is actually possible to make that full range just using three colours. I really recommend trying this yourself using whatever three colours you have. It doesn't matter if it's a pinkish red or like a true red, but have a go. So in order to test out my skin mixing, I'm going to paint a portrait. I'll do most of this in time lapse, otherwise this would be a really long video. I used a reference photo from Pinterest and I drew this into my sketchbook. I'm using a kneaded eraser here just to remove some excess graphite. I'm going to use my Roman Szmal paints for this one, and I think from memory I used the Hanza yellow, but this time I used the quinacridone red, which is a preferred red of mine. I'm doing the shadows here using obviously blue, which is a little bit unconventional. Normally I don't go in hard with blue shadows, but this particular photo had some really high key and low key lighting, a real contrast between the highlights and the shadows, and I wanted to capture that. And sometimes using those non-conventional colours can really help bring that out. I do wish in hindsight that I'd kind of softened some of those edges. They do end up being a little bit hard on the side of his face. But what's really beautiful with the blue for the shadows is how it complements the sort of peachy skin tone that I've built up here. I didn't go quite as pink with this one as I usually tend to do. I always test out my colours before going in on my actual painting. For the hair here, I'm using a dagger brush, which is actually fantastic for capturing loose hair. And I think from memory I used a couple of different yellows and browns. I think I used transparent yellow oxide, maybe a little bit of Naples yellow deep. I went in with a bit of hematite and a bit of caput mortem just to really get those sort of very sort of caramelly browns. I have no idea what colour I used for his eyes. You can see that the process of building this portrait has been in layers, and each of those layers is a very light wash. It's important to let each layer dry fully in between so that you don't end up with muddy colours. And my final touch is a few little dark areas. They work to create salience to draw the viewer's attention to the focal point of the image. I'm doing my background last, a little controversial according to some people. I'm using a mixture of Lunar Blue and Roman Szmal's Misty Morning, which are both granulating colours and very cool. And the satisfying tape peel to reveal those crisp, clean edges. Everyone loves that bit. I really hope this video has been helpful in order to show you that skin tones don't need to be some mystery. You don't need a million colours and you don't need premixes. You just need 3 basic primaries and any shade. I encourage you to have a go at home. Thanks for watching.